Produce hope. There's many ways. I would say that depending where you are, so I remember seeing hope as just another Bet Shalom friend, and also being a soccer mom when our kids had some soccer tournaments. And also, of course, she's Dr. Hope Seidel. And she's a board certified pediatrician, and she also is a life and parent coach. She is a full-time partner at the Cary Pediatric Center, and there are offices also Fuquay and Apex. And she has also her own private business, which is called Parenting Coaches. And she works one-on-one coaching parents to develop more intentional parenting. And doing exactly that, this summer, she had a video on parenting decisions during pandemic that really went viral, and I hear it had over 250,000 views, which is a lot. And she was also featured on ABC Good Morning America platform. And as I said, she has her own two teenagers who are wonderful, and Grace and Jared. And it's wonderful to have you, Hope, and we hope to learn quite a bit and pay attention. Sometimes we take for granted parenting, or we think it's intuitive, and there's a lot to learn. So I'm very much looking forward to see your presentation.
Thank you. That was lovely. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. Glad to be here. This platform for me is just a little awkward, so just bear with me a little bit. Rabbi, I'll just assume that you'll interrupt if there's some reason you can't hear me, or the slides aren't showing or anything. So, but thank you for that introduction. And so, listen, for those of you who don't know me well, let me start with this comment. The words that I'm sharing today with you are from some of my wisdom as a pediatrician and as a coach, but truthfully, they are a reflection of the work I've personally done to shift my mindset around painful and challenging times in my own family, okay? And so I'm just want to have a disclaimer that, first of all, do not ever put anything on the internet that you don't think is going to go anywhere, because it does. But the main thing I want you to know is that I'm a completely imperfect parent. I get stressed, I get frustrated, I get overwhelmed, I judge my children, I expect too much of them at times. I sometimes worry about them. I'm also an extremely resilient person, and this year has been a lot for me. And so I know it's been a lot for many of you. And I'm really honored today to be here to share with you some of the secrets that I believe contribute to resilience in our children, and how we can not only cope with challenging circumstances, but also maybe even welcome them at times. So let's get started. And if you guys end up having some questions, you want to put them into the chat area, or just jot them down. I will take a couple questions at the end if I can be helpful, or clarifications or whatnot. It's my pleasure. So as parents, you guys play a powerful role in your children's wellness. And for those of you who are here today that have grandchildren, I would say the same is true. And many of you as parents are pretty clear on that. Like, wellness is something many of you prioritize when you make an appointment with your pediatrician annually, which I hope that you do for checkups and vaccines. But keeping your kids well is also anchored in their emotional health. You also impact that powerfully. And at no time has that been more obvious to me than in the last year. And as a physician, you know, I'm really trained to heal the body, but I've long believed, far before I was a physician and since, that wellness in general really does start in your mind. True wellness really begins, and in my opinion, ends in the way that you think about things. The mind is really where resilience is born. And this is the foundation of the work that I do when I'm coaching parents on how to be intentional with the way that they parent their children. So today we're going to discuss cultivating resilience and how it leads to wellness with the following framework, okay? First, we're going to define what circumstances are exactly. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we think about them. We're going to learn a bit about how we feel and how our kids feel. And then identifying how our feelings make us act and how we show up for our kids. And then the results of all of these actions. Okay. So let's just start with a foundational principle. Okay. Circumstances are the facts of the world or of your life. I mean, this may be completely obvious to some of you, but circumstances in general are completely neutral until you assign meaning to them. So let me give you an example. Like a circumstance is the weather is 30 degrees. Okay. How you think about the weather decides if it's cold or not. So someone who's from Michigan might think that that's warm, and someone from here may think, or Florida may think that's freezing, right? Circumstances is the same, and the thought you think about it is what's impactful, okay? So the pandemic is a circumstance, okay? It's totally neutral. Okay. Some people are having thoughts right now of illness. Some of you are having thoughts about political agendas. Some are annoyed, having thoughts about their feelings about wearing a mask. Some of you are having thoughts about how difficult it is to homeschool and work at the same time. Some of you are having thoughts about family time and slowing down. And, there are plenty of people who think the pandemic is fantastic. The people who make toilet paper are pretty pumped about the pandemic. The people who make masks and hand sanitizer are crushing the pandemic. And so is Amazon and Peloton and a number of other people who are thinking the pandemic is really something, okay? Same circumstance, just totally different thoughts about it, okay? And the key is that we cannot ever control our circumstances. Frankly, we never could before, and we can't ever. We're just marinating a lot on it right now, okay? We can only control how we think about our circumstances. And right now, the absence of control is what many people are thinking about right now. But there really is a lot that we can control. So let's talk about our thoughts and what I say when I mean mindset, okay? So the word mindset makes a lot of people feel kind of uncomfortable, right? I'm not talking about yoga or meditating. In this context, mindset is simply your thoughts about something, okay? So like just the regular thoughts that run through your mind all day, every day, okay? Your mindset is everything in your parenting. How you choose to think about your kids, what kind of kid you have, how you choose to think about your children's pain, how you choose to think about their circumstances. Mindset is absolutely everything in your parenting, and it is frankly everything in your life. And once you manage that, you have a tremendous amount of power in your parenting, not over your kids, but power over you. Because you get to pick whatever you want to think about your circumstances and the circumstances your children are experiencing during the pandemic and any other time. Every single thought you have is always a choice. So we're clear, I am definitely not talking about a positive mindset, okay? I'm talking about an intentional mindset. I'm not suggesting that we all go around and be happy all the time and talk about gratitude and do journals and whatnot, okay? I call that toxic positivity, right? Where you're always happy about everything. And frankly, like life is roughly 50-50. Half of it's really awesome and half of it's not so great. And sometimes we want to be sad about things. Sometimes we want to be frustrated. Sometimes we want to be angry, like this week. Sometimes we want to be disappointed, okay? But what I see in my patients and in my clients, probably in that order, is that many of us parent accidentally with thoughts. Many of us parent accidentally with thoughts that are rooted in anxiety, fear, worry, doubt, judgment, and often expectation of our kids. Okay, we show up with our kids with an agenda or a premeditated worry, right? And we get in the way with our mindset. We get in the way with our mindset of our kids developing resilience. It's like if you worry that your kid's going to get a bad grade because they aren't turning their work in, and so you intervene and do their homework for them, okay? That's in the way. And that comes from a place of parenting from fear or worry. This is super common. And to be clear, something that I also have done and probably will forever do. Okay. And when we do that, we shape the way our children see their circumstances, right? If you take home nothing else from this talk, okay, please know this. Choosing your mindset and helping your children cultivate this skill, in my opinion, shapes your kids more than soccer, baseball, Cub Scouts, gymnastics, volunteering, getting good grades, what college they go to, all of it. And if you don't believe me, there are 25 of you who are here today for this talk, okay? When all those things are shut down, when all the external circumstances that we can't control are gone, so many circumstances, all you have left is how you choose to think about it. And many of us feel really vulnerable right now because we need help with that skill, which is good news because you guys are here, okay? So all of your thoughts that you think about your circumstances are what directly affect your feelings, okay? Your circumstances do not make you feel a certain way, okay? When your husband does not take out the garbage, when there's Amazon boxes on the porch and you're saying you feel frustrated because they keep coming, right? When the political unrest is happening and you think you're feeling angry, that circumstance is not making you feel a certain way, it's your thoughts around it, okay? So many feelings arise when we think we have little control. And I want to discuss the one that feels pervasive right now for many of us, and that is stress, okay? And the thoughts that we have about COVID create a very special stress, okay? It is a new circumstance that most of us, if not all, can't even put into context of our life. Like we've never been through a pandemic. It's unpredictable. So the new normal keeps changing, sometimes daily. Parents ask me advice in the office all the time. And I'm like, well, this is my advice today. It's difficult. It's enduring, like it feels like it's never going to end, right? There's so many repetitive disappointments for us and for our children. It's global, so it's happening to everyone all over the world, which is just completely bizarre. And it's invisible, like we can't see the virus. We just always are kind of on this edge of wondering where it is and whether they're going to get it. And then, of course, this is coupled with the political and current racial and social unrest right now, and it's a lot. Now, we are wired for stress in our primitive brain, okay? Our ancestors, when they were faced with real and like immediate danger, used acute stress to react quickly. Like their life literally depended on fear and stress. Stress plays a critical role in helping us when we are under threat. And many of you may know this, but I got to show you something doctory. So we have two parts of our nervous system that regulate our body unconsciously, okay? We have, when we have acute stress, okay, when we see a bear or something, it's our sympathetic nervous system that is activated. It's like our fight or flight or freeze. It just happens unconsciously. And you guys know how that feels. It's like increase in heart rate and your pupils are dilated. Maybe your stomach hurts. You breathe more quickly. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is what opposes this. This also happens unconsciously when you realize there's the stress in front of you and you're really afraid. And then you're like, recognize that the stress is over, your breathing slows down, and your body just generally returns us to the normal homeostasis, okay? And then to make things even more challenging, as we've evolved, we also have this prefrontal cortex that can think about our stress too, which is totally awesome. On purpose, we can just think about it all the time. We process stress this way, okay? And processing stress gives a lot of feelings, okay? But the overwhelming feeling that we have is anxious, okay? And anxious is the feeling that happens when we have thoughts about potential threats, okay? We stress ahead of time, like of all the things that could happen, right? Our brain loves to look for all the things that freak us out. Now, I just want to clarify one thing for any of you who are triggered by this conversation around anxious. Feeling anxiety is different than having anxiety. I'm sure that's obvious to you, but for the context of this conversation, I'm not talking about having anxiety. I'm talking about the feeling of feeling anxious, okay? Okay, so anxious feelings are about potential problems. I call this pre-traumatic stress, things we worry about ahead of time. And if you're like many of my patients and clients, and sometimes me, okay, thoughts that you may be having are some of the following, among many, okay? We might get sick. My kids won't get into a good college. Maybe everyone's going to be so behind. The quarantine's making everyone depressed and lonely. This is going to be a total lost year of disappointment and misery. I might not have my job. And some of us are feeling senses of hopelessness, with thoughts like, this is never going to get back to normal. And these thoughts are actually not true. Okay. Much of what we worry about, especially during normal times, never actually even happens. But our body does not know that. Okay. Our body believes our brain. Okay. And it responds to these anxious thoughts like it's real fear. Okay. And so we're on alert all the time. We feel this constant stress, which is not how evolution prepared us. Like we're supposed to have like a bear, it doesn't eat us, and then we're calm. Right now, we're just like this all the time. And so what do? We get on the internet and we look for more evidence that we should be completely freaked out. Okay. We look on the news, we look at Facebook, we check with our friends, we gossip about what's happening. And what you think about always grows. Think about what you're worrying about even today that hasn't happened yet. Just yesterday, I got my COVID shot. I'm going to get the other one, thankfully, in like 3 weeks. So I'm already thinking, like, I wonder if I'm going to get a fever. Am I going to have to miss work? Is that going to be a problem? Our brain loves that. It's like noise all in the back, okay? And so when we're stressed, we lose access to the parts that make us pause as parents, okay? And that constant worry keeps our parasympathetic system from balancing us back out. There's no space for that kind of homeostasis to return. And so we lose the things that we need the most in our parenting. We listen less. We have less empathy. We can be impatient. We're less flexible. Sometimes we lose language that's intentional, which is my nice way of saying we don't make good choices with our words. Our focus can be really poor. Sometimes we even lose creativity to think of new things that we could be learning or to do things with our children. And our energy is generally depleted when we're constantly on this level of stress. Like, aren't you people exhausted? I cannot remember a time I've been this physically tired. And it's so funny because we used to run around a million places with our children, right? And for me, this exhaustion this year has just felt so very different than when I was going and going and going. And the reason for that is that we're all on survival mode. Our mind is on survival mode. And pay attention to this, gem. Some of you live in this pre-traumatic stress all the time, not just this year. The pandemic is just making it worse. And from this place, from this energy, okay, we don't show up as we want for ourselves, for our partners, for our community, for our synagogue. And we certainly don't show up as the parents that we want to be. So how do we grow? How do we help kids grow and cope with like the emotion brought on by the pandemic and other challenging times? Now, let me just say there's always a bit of discomfort and confusion around how our kids are supposed to feel, okay? The single biggest thing parents always tell me in the office is that they want their kids to be happy. And I always think this is so hilarious because I don't understand why. Life is not always happy. Some of you who have been around longer than some of the younger parents can tell you that life is just about 50-50 all of the time when you're a kid and when you're an adult. Sometimes it's super sad. Having a full and healthy life embraces and honestly requires the contrast of good and bad. You aren't happy all the time. So why parents think their kids should be is laughable if you think about it from that perspective. And listen, our kids are accustomed to practicing things. They practice sports, they practice piano, they practice lessons in school. They have to practice rebounding from negative emotions. If you want to raise resilient kids, please do not take that practice from them. Allow them to practice pain. This is actually an awesome example of how you can change your mindset when you think of pain that your kids are in as a needed practice and as an opportunity. Notice as a parent, if you are one of the parents, like many, who believe that happiness is the right emotion. Notice if you think that having happy children is what makes you a good parent. And if this is a thought that you have, either one of them, I would invite you to consider how it's serving you and how it's serving your kids. And I would invite you also to consider adopting a thought like, I want my children to learn to process and move through pain, not around it. Now, when I coach parents, the first thing that we discuss is that in order to help our kids, we have to figure out our stuff first. Okay. This is the recipe to what I call clean parenting. Okay. And so I'm seeing, at least when I started seeing all of the pictures here, that like I know this is the men's club. I'm seeing both families and some men, right? But I think it's really important to think about how you were taught. Oops, sorry about that. How you guys were taught to process emotions by your own parents. How do you model your emotions for your children? Do you show them when you're just angry, or do you show them exactly when you're feeling overwhelmed and sadness? Do you pretend you're okay when you're not? Do you tell your kids how you're feeling, even when it's a feeling that's not positive? And most importantly, do you even know how you feel? Some of us are so used to not even paying attention to those cues for ourselves that we can't even access that for ourselves. Okay? So, our actions always come from how we feel. So there's a circumstance, there's the way you think about it, there are feelings that come from your thoughts, and then everything that you do comes from how you feel. Actions are what we do and what we don't do. Okay. So when our kids struggle, it can feel uncomfortable, and we can cope in a number of different ways. So, not just during the pandemic, I've been guilty at all of these. And so, pay attention to this part and think which part resonates with you. Okay. So, when our kids are feeling a negative emotion, we do one of the following things typically. We fix it, we jump in quickly to help our kids feel better with our solutions. We resist it. Okay, we say you're fine, or we redirect them because we really don't want to hear it. We don't have time to hear it. We're not even sure like what we're going to say if they have a problem, so we just kind of ignore it. Okay. Oftentimes, as parents, we minimize it. Why are you so worried about this? It's not a big deal. You're fine. You're just, it's fine. Okay. We shame it. This isn't how big girls act, sweetie. Or we tell our kids that they're overreacting or they're being dramatic. I've definitely done that. We don't even recognize sometimes that our kids are in pain. Okay. One thing you need to know about kids is that they don't always behave the way they're feeling. Okay. So if you have a sullen teenager or a child who's not sleeping well, or a kid who's not turning in work at school and that's atypical for them, or they're fighting with another child, right? Like oftentimes they're trying to express a feeling poorly in that scenario. And sorry, the other thing we do is we apologize. I'm so sorry you feel bad. I think that Mr. Rogers was probably the first parenting coach. I love him so much. And I love this slide. He's one of the wisest teachers in our lifetime, in my opinion. People have said, don't cry to other people for years and years. And all it's ever meant is, I'm too uncomfortable when you show your feelings, so please don't cry. I'd rather have them say, go ahead and cry. I'm here to be with you. Our job is not to keep our kids from having pain, as much as it would be really awesome if we could. Okay. It's not to rescue them from pain. It is to sit with them and be present and acknowledge it. Okay. To allow it. In coaching, we call this kind of holding space for that. Okay. And why is this so important? Okay. This is the other thing. If you don't listen to anything else in this talk, you can just take this home. Okay. Your child's ability to deal with a negative emotion will come from his or her experience of having one. Okay? Your child's ability to deal with a negative emotion will come from his or her experience of having one. One new thought that I recommend considering is that pain is the soil where resilience grows, that it has to be earned. And we're really building circuitry for our kids, okay? We need to be teaching our kids to regulate their feelings and to know that they're going to be okay if they feel them all. So, what do we do? What actions do we take? Well, you might first start with empathy. Okay. Empathy, as most of you know, is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And children need a consistent source of empathy and a need to be heard. It makes them feel safe. This is a little pearl. If you want to have, if you want your children to have empathy for others, give it to them. That's how they see that. Okay. How we show up is always a better model for our kids than what we tell them in every place, for sure. And most importantly, empathy creates connection, okay? It removes the alone component of distress, okay, and replaces it with presence and understanding and support. And it's just, it's perfectly safe to just to start your empathy with just noticing and describing what you see. You see your kid kind of having a meltdown in front of their online school, for example, and you just can honor that. It feels really hard doing online school because it's new, right? I'm here. Or I can see it's really hard to sit still. I can stay here with you. Half of you are like, I can't stay there. What are you talking about? But just go with me, okay? When you have a kid going back to school and maybe they're having some anxiety, anxious feelings about it, you can just acknowledge it. You seem really nervous about school. I totally hear you. There's no right way to think about starting school. And you're totally allowed to feel anxious and excited and nervous and sad and happy. And a lot of kids are also having a tough time right now with things they cannot do. And just even acknowledging that, I can see how disappointed you are that you're not having a senior year. Instead of saying, I'm so sorry you're not having it, I just offer like, you feel sad and you are totally allowed to feel that way. It makes complete sense to me. Notice how it just creates a space where our children are seen and their feelings are seen. And even if they don't realize that they're having that feeling and you name it, they know how their body feels and they can give it a name too. And you can also simply just repeat the question that they asked. Like if your kid says, I just hate this pandemic, I just want to know when it's going to end. You could just acknowledge you're wishing the pandemic would end. Like I hear that. It's fine. The final thing that you can do, among many examples I'm leaving out today, is to tell a child a story about your own childhood that matches theirs. So this would not be a time to tell them all the reasons why there isn't as bad as when you were a kid, just so we're clear, okay? It matches theirs. So one time I had a time when X, Y, and Z happened and I felt really disappointed. You might even say, and in my body that felt really like my heart was beating fast, or I felt like I was gonna be sick, or I felt like any physical feeling you can have, which is beyond this talk, but just, showing them that you also had that feeling can also create a place where they feel safe. And finally, empathy comes from shared experiences. And this is an amazing time to practice because we are all also in our own crazy drama. Like things are difficult for many of us. And usually our kids are struggling over things that we no longer worry about, like a young love or losing a soccer game or having a difficult time on a test, right? And so it's more tempting with our lens to be able to make it better for them. But right now we're all collectively having a moment. And so the other thing I would offer is that you give some empathy to yourself. Like, this is a challenging time. Yeah, truth. And just sharing that with your friends as well. We're all really, in many ways, grieving right now. And so are many of our children. We're grieving losses that are ongoing, as I've alluded to earlier, right? And your awareness of their grieving helps you to be more calm with them. And remember, like any of the stages of grief, like grief is not linear. So sometimes you'll think, this happens to me all the time. I'm like, I totally got this pandemic. I'm fine. Like my mindset is great. I'm grateful for all of it. And then the next day I'm a basket case. Like, I think it's just having permission to move in and out of all of those stages of grief is a totally appropriate way for both you and your kids to handle it. Empathy makes room for us to feel all of our feelings. And again, moving through your feelings, not around them, not paying attention to them, is what creates resilience. I did that hard thing. When you do something really hard and you look back on it, you're like, man. So what if your child comes to you and you don't want to react the way you have in the past? What if some of the things I've suggested are things that you do? Please, dear God, say they are, because I know I have, right? What if your child comes to you and you don't want to react the way you have in the past? A couple of suggestions just to consider. The best thing to do is to ask questions. It keeps you out of being in charge of their solution, and it gives you more information. One of the first questions I like to ask, even in my office, is tell me more. Can you tell me more? This avoids assuming that your kids are having the exact same experience that you are or the same pain. Okay. Remember how we spoke about that pre-traumatic stress that you can have when there's a lot of worry and your kids have a lot of worry about things that haven't happened yet. Another question to ask is, what can we control? And this is the one way we get back in charge of our circumstances. We change our thoughts about what we can control. And then you and your kids aren't a victim to what is happening to us, because we're teaching our kids that we can choose how we see it and we can choose intentionally what to do. And this is a much more empowering place for kids to be. It's not an instead of feeling. It's a, I hear that this is really overwhelming, sad, disappointing, whatever the emotion is, and what can we control? Okay. The other thing is to really be able to see your kids and to honor them. And what I mean by that is that, let me tell you what I see. Here's something that I do know. You're strong and you're brave. Wouldn't it be like amazing for your kid to hear, I trust you know how you feel and I want to hear how you feel. And also I know that you have everything inside of you to handle this. I see that in you. It gets back to that slide I said before where like what you believe about your child becomes their inner voice. I love that thought so much. What you believe about your child becomes their inner voice. And if you believe that this is something that they can handle, your belief will become something that they believe. And the final comment I'll make, because this comes up a lot, is, and this is independent of questions to ask, always tell your children the truth. Always. Even when it's hard, even when you're tempted to protect them, children are very intuitive. They know something is wrong when something's wrong. And when you act like it's not, or you don't answer them in truth, even if you don't know what the solution is, you accidentally teach them that when they know something's wrong, they can't trust that. Okay? You accidentally teach them that. It's always better to tell them the truth and make them feel safe. Okay? Our kids are genuinely watching us very carefully. The other thing that they're watching us do is they're watching how we handle incompetence. Okay? So when we have a meltdown because we can't figure out a Zoom meeting, or how we react to others who are learning things for the first time. I did not do this well last week when they could not get the vaccines out in the right way to all of the first responders. I did not act well in that way. I had a lot of impatience for a system that no one has ever done because I was frustrated. Think today what your mindset is about your children's suffering. And is it possible for you guys to see it as an opportunity? Most importantly, I would invite you guys to consider that this is a chance to stop and not to fix anything. The only thing that matters during this school year specifically is that your child feels seen and supported, and that you feel seen and supported, period. The only thing that matters is that your child feels seen and supported. And one of the beautiful things that's happening right now is that we can lean on our kids as teachers. You know, when we first started this whole pandemic and we started to make it a rule that masks had to be worn, and all the parents said, my child's never going to wear a mask. It's not going to happen, right? And I would walk into the office and kids would be in a mask and they make a big deal because they had one that was fun. You know, not to make you feel bad, but to be honest, most of the kids that I see in my pediatric office are doing way better than the parents. Not all of them are doing well. I don't want to trivialize the kids who are feeling socially isolated, the children who are worried, like there's stuff going on. But overall, the kids are doing better. I read recently that we should probably thank our kids on a regular basis for all that they have given up so that they can protect those of us who are older. Notice this. Notice how well some of our kids are adapting until we remind them of how bad things are. When they hear us talking about how online school is so awful, when they hear us complaining about things in the store, how things aren't going the way we want them to. I just wonder, like, what are you learning about your kids right now during this time when you don't have an option to fix it all? And have you told them what you're learning about them? When they're doing things better than you are, thank them. Tell them, you're teaching me so much. I really admire your resilience. Admire the resilience that they already have and tell them. To be honest, like the best way to cultivate resilience in your kids is to show them that you see it. All right, so what about you? How are you balancing adult life? Don't forget that when we're on high alert, okay, our parasympathetic system doesn't work automatically. And so we have to do an intentional reset. That's the only way we're going to get out of that kind of chronic stress, kind of a space. And we want to be super intentional to do things that calm our pre-traumatic stress as well. And this is a time when self-care is really critical. Okay, that's the way that we reset this flight or fight. Here are the things that help us reset on purpose. Okay, listen, you don't have to do all these things. Just pick one. You don't have to bake bread and get a Peloton and do like a special healthy eating class and all the things. Okay, exercise, even a light walk, getting adequate nutrition, good sleep, laughter and crying and feeling your own emotions and letting your children witness that feels amazing. Being in a routine, but also having your kids have a little bit of control is also helpful. Hobbies, including organizing, can be really, that's my thing. I just feel really like I'm in control of my pantry. It's been cleaned like 700 times. It is beautiful, by the way. Meditation, if that is your jam, is amazing. And sometimes even just social connection, even if you're just socially connecting with your kids for a simple 10 minutes or with a friend on Facebook, it's not the same. I mean, on Zoom, it's not the same, but it still can reset you. And then, of course, the things that we do just as Jews, as um, part of the way that we think about the world, generosity, supporting others, self-care, caring for others, and also gratitude. Start by figuring out why it's so hard for you to find these things, okay? But let's be real. Like in my office, all the kids are on weird sleep cycles. The parents have been asking me how much social media is too much social media. Everybody has their phones in their room when you're trying to work from home and you can't juggle both things. I've seen a ton of kids be putting on a little extra weight because everyone's bringing home treats because everything feels so overwhelming and they want to just soothe, everyone's emotional dysregulation, and our routines are off. And you know what? It is okay. You guys are completely crushing the pandemic. So I would really love to see you have some grace for yourself. If you haven't already started to embrace B- work as a parent, now would be a good time. Like, what if you just changed your mindset and decided that success in this time as a parent is literally just showing up? That's it. Just show up. So, what results do we get? And why am I killing most of you with all of this mindset and feeling work? Well, the answer is because as a doctor, I see your children coming in with all sorts of health issues that I believe are feelings that they can't describe. Behavior almost always is an unmet need or a feeling that isn't adequately being described. And they have physical feelings too of abdominal pain or headache or sleep issues, or they just verbalize fears that are atypical for them. And many of my parents are resistant to this possibility. But this is not only during the pandemic. I see kids all of the time in the last almost 20 years. My Black teens, for example, are showing so much stress right now. They feel unseen. Some of them feel afraid. Notice what your kid is bringing to you from a physical standpoint and be curious. I wonder if this is a feeling that I'm just not paying attention to. Traumatic events in general can be extremely transformative, but not always negative. Look at the events of this last week. I mean, post-traumatic growth in general is more likely if we allow for discomfort. And it's important for our kids to be uncomfortable about this kind of uncertainty and to know you're here to answer whatever questions that you can answer and that some don't have an answer. And my most resilient children in my office, and frankly, my own children who are quite resilient, have parents who are open to this thought that the discomfort is on purpose and it's okay. So, what do we want to keep from this time? And what do you guys want to let go? Engage your kids in this conversation, okay? It's important to think through what parts of this unexpected opportunity that we've had are things that unexpectedly actually have brought us great joy. What our kids are losing right now in achievement, they are going to gain in resilience. And the gift that I'm choosing to see, the thought I'm choosing to have with COVID and all of our collective suffering, is that it has made it nearly impossible to rescue our children from pain. And many of you guys feel so helpless because a lot of us have been orchestrating our kids' lives intentionally to avoid pain or creating these kind of manufactured opportunities to bring them joy, right? Many experts actually feel that we're not serving our children by doing this. And in this collective slowing down that has not been optional, it feels really confusing for a lot of my families. But I do have to wonder if this is the natural end of the helicopter parent, because by the time this is over, it's really going to be not as familiar to sort of micromanage all of these feelings. I want to offer you a question to consider as sort of my third take home point that I think would be useful for you to hold. What if you believed that your children actually had all the resilience that they needed, and the only thing in the way of that was you? What if you believed that they already had all the resilience they needed? Listen, I don't have a roadmap. I know some of you were hoping for some worksheet to get like an A in the pandemic, but please know this. This time is going to shape our kids forever and us. And we are forever going to be parents of a pandemic, of the pandemic. They're going to write about us in the history books. Our kids are going to be defined by this moment in their lives. And what I know to be true is that who we are as parents and how we show up in the world is the strongest predictor of how our kids will handle this time and how they will handle, frankly, any time. Resilience in general is at the intersection of adaptability, of flexibility, and of learning. And when the only thing that I can count on is my mindset, these are the thoughts that I choose among several, but these are my favorites. This time is stressful and full of opportunity. I'm disappointed and grateful. I trust that my children can handle this time. I trust that I can handle this time. And my kids are watching how I show up. This is, we don't really have to teach resilience, you guys. We have to notice that we can override stress intentionally and that we can allow our kids to be in pain and that it's difficult and that it's uncomfortable and then we can give them empathy. And I want to encourage you guys to be brave and let your kids struggle a bit. Do this in all of your parenting. It's important. It is some of the very hardest and most important work of parenting, in my opinion. My email below is where you guys can reach me if you have any questions or concerns about my talk or coaching or anything. I'm super grateful that you've given me all this quiet time. It's so awkward when I can't see any of your faces, but if anybody has a couple questions, I'd be glad to take some before we end. I want to honor your time. So that's it. Thank you.
Well, I'll say first, thank you, Hope, and it's wonderful. I feel, I've known you for many years and seen you parenting also, and it's wonderful to hear all this almost worldview that you're presenting, right? Because it's not just about our children, right? It starts with how we can show up for them. So thank you very much. I think, at least for me, and I'm sure for everybody, there were lots of points where I was making my mental notes. Let's remember this and let's review that. So thank you very much. And you see, you have you have some thank yous there in the chat. There's a question, I think, comes from
well,
Andy.
Yeah, Julianne asked, you made a distinction between having anxious feelings and anxiety. So I just am a little kitschy with the word anxiety as a provider. I don't like when a parent comes into the office and says to me, my child has anxiety. To me, anxiety is like a mental health condition. Okay, that and so it may just be semantics to you, honestly, Julianne, but to me, it's not. Like anxiety says there's something wrong with my child. They usually comes in that kind of energy where there's something wrong. He has anxiety, as if it's like a illness or something, like it's like a thing that happened to him. And so I just think it's appropriate to say to your child, like, you sound really anxious, like that's an anxious feeling, and not make that mean that they have anxiety. To me, they're just very different. Does that answer your question? You can take your mute off if you need to. But I just don't think they're the same. So anxious feelings are typically transient. They're something to be tolerated. They come up all the time. They're not necessarily something that's going to last forever. But people who have like clinical anxiety just show up differently clinically, and it's persistent, and it requires a totally different level of assessment. So I didn't want anybody who was listening to the talk who had actual anxiety to be thinking like, I can't just think myself out of this all the time. Although I will say that I believe that can be done to some extent, but that's for another talk. I think, Jeff, we can get a copy of the recording. Yeah, I mean, I know they recorded it, so Rabbi, I'm sure you can do that. And any other questions at all?
Thank you, Hope.
It's my pleasure. I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you, Hope.
You're welcome.
Is it Judy?
Yeah. Hope, I like the way you said that you have some of those feelings, so that gives other people the right to have those feelings as well. And that was very helpful. A lot of times we just hear this and this and this, but the fact that you say you have them at times too is helpful.
All of the time. And listen, the reason I have to say that is because my kid's in the other room and he's thinking like, what are you telling these people? Because you do that all the time. They know. Yeah. Our kids are our greatest path towards personal transformation. They are a mirror for us. They always show us our stuff, right? And so I'm always showing up imperfectly, but I am accountable for it. And I recommend that too. My kids know I'm not perfect, and it gives them space to know that they don't have to be either, right? And none of us are normal, Ellen. So, it's all good. Maybe you are, I'm not. So good. Anything else? Nope.
Thanks, Hope.
Thanks.
Hope, it was awesome. It was very insightful, and it was highly educational.
Yeah,
it was
appreciate
really
this.
Great.
Before you go, for all of you who want a recording so you can share, yes, we record this on Zoom. So I will ask you, please, we'll have the recording probably tomorrow. And if you want to email our office, email Shayna saying, can I please get a recording? And she can send an email with the link where all of you can get it.
Yeah. Yep. You guys can reach out to me at any time. All right. Much love to all of you. Hang in there. Happy New Year.
You.
Everybody be safe. Okay.